Welcome to Real Talk with Jackie Feagin Associates. I'm here today with Caitlin Ferguson and Whitney Rasco, both team members of ours, and we're going to chat a little bit today about how do you buy a new home when you currently have a home to sell, whether you want to move up to something bigger or maybe downsize to something smaller with less maintenance. But there are some challenges when you do that. So, Caitlin, you want to tell us, what do you think?
I think there are a lot of things that we have to consider when, buying and selling. It can be very complex. I know Whitney just experienced this.
Literally just had this with a recent seller/buyer in January. And there are a lot of moving parts. You definitely have to time it right, because if you don't, it's like no deal anymore. Right. But yeah, I just had it.
Well, what do you think was most helpful to you, knowing that you had a seller who wanted to move to a different area and she just had her mind focused on where she wanted to be and what type of home that she want? What do you think was most helpful to you?
I think most helpful was, I'm not going to say what's most helpful. What I would have done differently is at our initial appointment, I would have brought or showed my calendar on my phone to clearly, with a visual, show what the timeline would look like, because it gets really down to the nitty-gritty with quick days, especially when there's loans that need to be ended and loans that are going to be starting. And my seller buyer, she was also a VA purchaser. So that VA loan had to have been paid off before her eligibility renewed. But what I would have done differently is brought either an actual calendar or had her look at my phone calendar to see this is what this looks like, to be able to prepare her for what it would look like, because it can get finicky when you're trying to make that switch and you've got a sale involved, but your heart's also in this new house.
Right.
It's a lot of emotions. I think we talked about on our other podcast about home buyers being emotionally, into a home that they love. And we didn't get a chance to talk about sellers, but sellers have it too. So it's a lot of emotions going both ways in that situation.
We've had to talk about that, detaching the seller from the home and referring to it as a property now.
Yeah, because it was their home and now they're getting ready to sell it and they still have all those emotional attachments. But one thing I wanted to touch on, Whitney mentioned just now a VA loan. Some of you may not know that there are loans out there just for people who have served in the military at one point or another. And that is a veteran's loan that's used where you can buy something with no money down. And so if you've ever served in the military at any capacity, you may be eligible for that loan. So your seller had a VA loan and she wanted to buy another property using that VA loan. And sometimes those have other challenges with them as well.
For sure. And she was doing a move up. I know we talked about moving up or down. She was actually doing a move up. She was going from a townhome, 900 square feet, to a single family home that was about 1,600 square feet.
Okay. So what did you find was when you were pricing that townhouse that she had? What special things did you use to find that right price to get buyers into that home?
So I priced that using the strategy I use with all houses that I'm going to list. So definitely did a market analysis to see what houses were selling for in that area. And she and I had been talking for about a year about her doing something with her house, but it took us a year to get there. So she had seen a market analysis of her home before. So over the time, we kind of talked about what I was going to do and what I did do. So definitely checking out the market, going to see houses that were listed, that hopefully some of them were vacant so that we could just kind of get in and just kind of look at what houses were looking like. that were on the market to help her prepare her house. But yeah, definitely the market analysis was probably the best help to make sure we priced it right, because we didn't want to scare anybody away from purchasing, but we also knew that we had to get the house sold in order for her to purchase. And we actually went with our first offer. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went with the first offer we got. It was full price. So we went with it, and the ball just kept rolling from there.
Okay.
That's good. I think when something that you mentioned about the buyer going out and looking at properties, that happened prior to the sale of their home. So that's something that another thing you touched on was that it took a year for you guys to plan for this to happen. So there are, like you said, a lot of moving pieces in this type of transaction. So it makes sense that you may have to plan that for a year and make sure that they have somewhere else to go. And noting that it's important to be pre-qualified to purchase that next house before you make the sale.
That's something that we didn't talk about. But yes, that pre-approval is going to be important.
So with some sellers, you actually have some of them who are like, no, I don't want to sell my house until I find the right house. So how do you deal with that situation if the seller is like, nope, let's not even talk about putting our house on the market because you got to find me the right house first. How do you get that?
The buyer first situation, the buy first and sell later.
Yeah.
I think there's pros and cons to both, but I would say the pro to buying first and selling later is because you found your next home, you can get settled. You may not be as rushed on your timeline about moving, which is extremely stressful. And that's the part, like you said, that sneaks up on people. Is, okay, I know I'm signing documents. I know that this happening on this date.
But
however, I have to actually do these other parts that aren't like relevant, or they're not, there in front of you to start packing and getting all of those things situated. So I think that helps and makes people feel comfortable that they'll have their own space to be in, to relax while they're still dealing with the sale. And then I would say the con of that is you have 2 mortgages.
Yeah.
So
on staging wise, I think when you buy first, I think another pro is that you have a place to move your stuff, but you also have a place that you can leave your stuff to only leave what's needed, because I think the number one thing with sellers is clutter. So if you have somewhere to put that stuff, if your house shows well, then you can for sure sell it. Price well, of course, but as far as staging goes, if you have somewhere to move that stuff, then that gives you more room to really, place things in the house how you want for it to look well.
Exactly.
Pictures.
keep it market ready.
But what about those sellers that they don't have the money to get 2 mortgages, or they don't have that kind of income that allows them to do that? What are some things available? Let's say I have, a seller who's been in their house for 30 years and they've been paying their mortgage, and that's all that they have is the equity in their house. What are some things that they can look forward to doing if they would like to buy another house?
I would highly recommend talking to a lender, one that is good at looking at big financial picture. And I would definitely recommend that they look at a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. A bridge loan is another possibility. So there are options. It is a lot more helpful when there is equity in the home to play with, so that the seller can purchase and the transaction is a little bit smoother. It does make it difficult when it's tighter. And
when there's equity in a home, the seller does have that advantage of talking to a lender and maybe possibly taking some of that equity out to then qualify for another mortgage. There's also, a bridge loan that they can use, but as we know, not everybody is in those financial circumstances. So those those things are limited to people with equity and a good financial stable picture that they can do. But most times we have...
That's for the strongest
those most times,
buyers.
Let's be honest. We have the client who, this is my house. I want to move into another house, and I don't have the funds or the luxury to go buy first. So, Whitney, how do you see that happening for that seller, that they just don't have the funds to move on to another house before, they can sell their home?
Okay, this is when you call in the best professional real estate team, because when I tell you, it can happen, but it takes this, okay? We have it here, and that's how I did it with my most recent client. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of strategy. Once the house was listed, hit the ground running to find a house. Sometimes that comes with a contingency, but in our case, it ended up working out. But yeah, it's just about strategy. And something that Caitlin touched on last podcast was being able to tackle those hurdles that come up. It was stressful. I'm not going to lie. It was very stressful.
Yeah, how many phone calls did I get? I just want to say, how many phone calls and texts? I'm just like, okay, we can do this.
Like, Miss Jackie. What? And so that's why I said it takes the knowledge to be able to make a strategy, because we have come to find out that no client is the same, no transaction is the same. So when you tailor it for that person, you can make it and figure out the best game plan for them. But yeah, we had to hit the ground running. Really, the strategy is, you might, if you're pre-approved, you might want to go ahead and start looking for your house. Even if you don't get the house that's on the market before you list, at least you got an idea of what pricing looks like for you. You can still talk with your lender because you're pre-approved to make sure that this pricing works for you monthly. And then you price your house correctly. We give you advice on how to price your house the way we feel like it would meet your criteria. So pricing strategy, and then making your house market ready. That is the biggest thing. Those pictures are on the www forever, okay?
Ever.
and forever.
Yes. And when that photographer comes in and takes those photos, that's it. We're going live after that. So if you're not ready and the house is not ready, that's what the whole wide world is seeing. They're seeing your house, looking the way it does. And we all know people are attracted to a house when they see it on the internet.
Yes.
And that's what's going to get people in the door. So your house kind of has to stay that way, looking that way the whole time it's listed, looking like, oh, okay, yeah, these fake people live here because everything is clean, everything is put in its right place. And like I said, we live one way, but we have to sell another.
Yes.
And I think that's our specialty, is getting that house ready.
And that's a look now, the minimalist look. It's a thing.
Yes.
So it's
attractive.
May be helpful for some people to sell now with that actually being a home trend. There was a couple things you guys mentioned. One, I want to say that there's like a protection that can kind of be there for a seller if they have not found a place yet. Because I know that that's a big thing, is where do I go? What do I do? And I'm having that, discussion now with a potential buyer about, okay, she's talking to me, telling me that she wants to sell. And I'm like, okay, hon, where are you going to go? And she's like, I don't know. I didn't think about that. Okay. So sometimes if you have not located the next property yet, you can ask for a rent back. And so that's where you are able to stay in the home that you're selling post-closing for an agreed amount of time.
An agreed amount of money.
Yes, an agreed amount of money.
Money. And can't stay for free.
Yes, not for free. Negotiate. We'll say that. Negotiate. But that is an option to sellers if, you needed it, so that would help someone feel a little bit more comfortable to say, hey, if we needed to utilize this window, let's go ahead and put that out there. And that'll help the buyer coming in know to possibly be a little bit patient. You don't really want something like that to sneak up on you.
Yeah.
So that rent back, let's touch on that a little bit. So the seller is selling their home. They've now sold it to a new owner, which was the buyer. I have a lot of sellers, when they do rent back, they have a hard time understanding you're no longer
That's
the
not
owner.
your house anymore.
So they're like, you're paying rent now. And they always want to do things during that period. And it's like, no, sir. And, I always say sir because it's usually the sir in a relationship that says, well, it's our house. It's like, no, it's not your house.
I know you didn't move your stuff out.
Yes.
However, comma.
Yes. Yeah. Your stuff didn't leave.
There's a new name on the deed.
Exactly. There's a new name on the deed. So anything you want to do during that time period, we've got to ask permission to that new person that's on the deed, because it's no longer you, because now you're looking for a new home, and you have a set time frame. So that's always a very difficult thing for people to understand, that once that closing happens, that house is no longer theirs.
Right.
The other side of that is a buyer possession, which is what we ended up utilizing, was a buyer possession. And that costs too. Yeah. That costs too. Same thing still applies. You're possessing the property early as a buyer before closing. You have to pay for the days that you're there. Rent back, you're renting the property back from your buyers. And in both scenarios, you can't do anything crazy with the house because it's not yours yet.
Yeah, and in both those situations, sometimes delays happen. Delays can happen with your homeowner's insurance company saying, oh, wait, we didn't write the policy the way we should have, so it can cause delays. You could have a change in credit situation, and now everybody is in a position where they're in a property that's legally not theirs. They're just occupying it for that short amount of time. So I like to always get a security deposit from anyone. And this is hard for people to understand. What? You want me to pay a security? This is to protect everyone involved with it, because anything can happen. Your movers coming to pick up stuff, they can put a hole in the wall. They can, things happen. Right. And, I like to say it's just in case shit happens. Right. And that's why that deposit is there, is because in case stuff happens, everyone's protected and they feel a little bit more comfortable with that.
And it's the one time you don't take the deposit.
Yep.
You get a hole in the wall.
Exactly.
Doggone hole in the wall.
There was another thing you mentioned that I think could have been a challenge, and I'm curious if it was, the time frame. So, when people ask, well, when's the best time to buy? But we know that the spring is when it's, the buyers are outside, there's more listings on the market. Because you did this in, January?
December to January.
January.
Yes.
How was that? Was the timing a challenge?
The timing, as far as the house being listed and being sold,
was like the inventory and her looking and trying to locate. No,
and I'll tell you this: the house that we ended up purchasing, that was our second or third offer in the winter season. So I think we probably would have dealt with maybe more this spring, just because of the way we can already see the changes in the market. So I guess technically it was like kind of an advantage, but it still wasn't our first offer that we put in. But her house selling did come pretty quickly. Yeah,
it's all about the price point, and the area. In our area right now, we are in a very hot market. I hate to use that term, hot market, because people are like, what? How hot is it? Temperature hot. I would say we're in a very active market. That's probably the better term. In Virginia Beach, it's just one of those things that this area causes lots of buyers to come here. We're a tourist town. We've got beaches. We've got, a great school system. So lots of things for people to find it attractive. So we're still in, a market right now where there's multiple offers, and people are just being what? Because they read the national news saying, oh, wait, inventory is low, sellers are not doing this, they're not doing that. But right now for us, we are very blessed that we're in a market that we can still get multiple offers, and sellers are getting, some good money for their property right now, which when you're selling and buying, you're like, wait, it's two different things right now. They're like, oh, I got all this good money for selling, but now wait, I gotta be on the other
side. Some of that
back. So that's why. Wait. So that's kind of hard for people to swallow sometimes. It's they're the seller and they're grateful for all these offers they're getting cash over. But when it's time to buy, all of a sudden that wallet gets a little tight. You're like, wait, I don't want to do that.
It is really, people are really focused on their part. Like, what am I doing? I am selling my home. And so the consideration of the buyer is something that I feel like as an agent, I have to intentionally put out there and kind of say, I represent you, and because I represent you, I need to let you know what's happening on the other side.
Correct.
And vice versa, because you need to know that.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. You got to switch those hats. I will say, now that we're further into this conversation, that was one hurdle for us. It was trying to switch the hats. Like, okay, yes, you were selling your house. You are the seller. Okay, now you are the buyer. So I want you to put yourself in the buyer's shoes for the house that you're selling. And to switch back and forth is honestly, even for me being the orchestrator, is very, very emotionally draining. Like, look, you're not the seller in this situation. You are the buyer. We are making requests. But for your house, you are the one that's answering the request. So you have to, let's switch our hats now. Okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, constantly switching our hats. And that's why having a real estate agent with you that knows what they're doing is so key, because it takes a lot of orchestrating behind the scenes. I know we look pretty wearing our jewelry and stuff, but at night we're on the phone, getting all these deals together and working all the challenges. So when we get a chance to talk to our client, we've already processed all the emotions and deal with all the challenges.
We're off of it, and now it's time to talk.
So that's kind of, what we do. So we mentioned some things that I wanted to go back on. One of them was the closing dates. And you mentioned having a VA buyer. So let's explain that. And again, that's a loan for a veteran or any type of loan. Sometimes you can't close on the same day on both properties. So tell us a little bit about how that worked out for you.
Okay, so yes, you cannot close on the same day for both properties, because when you are selling a home that you have used your veterans eligibility for, you have to free that up in order to purchase your next home. So we did our closing within 2 days, which is the extent of the buyer possession that we did as well. It was just 2 days. But you can't do it the same day. We had a loan officer he was pretty good at saying, I'm going to do this, hopefully we can get it back in a day, but if it's not, it's going to be 2. It ended up being the 2 days. And then those next few days, it looked like she had everything available to her to use her VA eligibility. Okay. Yeah.
The other thing is, there are tax implications when you sell your home. How do you handle that with the seller, knowing that, what are some of the things you counsel them on when they've lived in a home and they may have to pay taxes on that when they file, the following year? What are the things that they could be facing?
So if you've owned your home for 2 years, then you do not have to pay the capital gains tax if you sell your home after occupying it for 2 years. Also, if you've owned for 2 years, and then I believe you have to rent for 3.
If you sell within 5 years.
If you sell within 5 years, you can also be exempt from capital gains tax. So the time of the year that you sell, looking at that timeline is important, and looking at that to see whether or not you're going to get taxed if you sell your home. So that may be something that you may want to sit on and wait a month or 2 months for, or maybe you don't. It depends on the situation, but that's definitely something that will have to come up in conversation, because again, tax season rolls around and you might have been right there like within a week.
Yes, and you sold too soon. So with that, currently the tax laws say if you're a single person, you can get up to $250,000 without paying capital gains on your investment. And for married individuals or couples who bought together, that's up to $500,000. So this is what's in the tax code today. So when you purchase, you want to check with your accountant or whoever files your taxes to make sure that you still fall within those parameters. Because we as agents know the general code, but we are not your accountants, and we don't work for the IRS. We're just guiding you and making sure that you meet those requirements that you have. So what about if it's an investment property? You've never lived in the property and you're getting ready to sell.
So if you've never lived in it and you're getting ready to sell, it has to be rented for what?
Doesn't matter. You can rent it for 90 days if you want, but you're going to pay taxes on it. But there are some things, if you go and buy another property equal or greater value, then you won't have to. You're deferring the tax. I'm not saying
I don't want to use the.
Yeah, you're never going to pay tax, but you're deferring the tax at a later date. So if it was an investment property, as long as you purchase another property that's of equal value or greater, then you can defer that tax, that you have to pay on that.
And people continue to do that as they move up in purchasing larger investment properties. That is a strategy that people use to ensure that they, don't have to pay the taxes on that property at that time.
Okay. So anything else you would want to say to someone who's thinking about buying a property and, selling one at the same time?
I do. So selling expenses, I think that's something that people don't take into account. Preparing your home to sell is an expense. Closing costs as a seller is an expense. It costs to play this real estate game. I've had 2 sellers put their stuff in a storage unit because it was just way too much stuff in the house. Having your house professionally cleaned. There's just a lot of expenses. Like, you can't just say, unless you just keep a market ready home, which I don't know anybody that's just always ready to list their house. It costs. So I think that's something to note. It's just when you plan to sell your house, there's going to be some upfront expenses. And then don't forget about closing costs. And then about closing costs with flipping that hat, it's like, okay, you may not be wanting to give closing costs, but on the other hand, as a buyer, would you want to receive some closing costs? So just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, there are several expenses, and we'll probably do another podcast on all the expenses that we talk about in real estate to get your property on the market ready to go. Because as agents, we take on a lot of expenses ourselves before we even get to the closing table. And that's what the public doesn't realize is your agent, your realtor, whatever, we don't get paid until it closes. And sometimes, unfortunately, properties do not sell for one reason or another, and we are out of that expense. So we don't like to be, but sometimes it happens. More often than not, we do get to the closing table, so we enjoy what we do. Right. And, like I said, we provide real talk here at, this podcast. So until next time, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you.